Welcome to tonight's Animal Reiki info call. Really appreciate all of you for being here and for really feeling this call towards this curiosity about what the practice of Reiki is and how we can offer and create this beautiful, gentle space for wellness and well-being and inner contentment and peace, both for ourselves and for our loved ones of all varieties. Reiki has been tremendously meaningful in my own life. It is now my chosen path and career that I work on all day long, every day. It's just something that I really enjoy, and I love sharing it with people. I love connecting with people about Reiki. I love going to meetings and conferences and having online meetings and discussions like this. And I'm just so excited to get to hear what everyone is interested in, what speaks to you personally, what speaks to your heart, what makes this something that you feel energized about or curious about or excited about. So hopefully we'll get to address a lot of those kind of burning questions and key interests that you're holding right now. And of course, I just know that there will be so many other interests and questions that will open up as we start talking about it and beyond in the future. So we'll keep getting these opportunities to come back, to interact online. You're welcome to reach out to me by email and Facebook and through other various places online that work for you. So I just really appreciate you being here and helping to create this opportunity for each other, because each person's question will have some element of value for other people as well. So it's wonderful to get to have our own needs met, and then to also know that we are helping to contribute to the learning and the lives of others. So thanks for joining me. And then for everyone else who listens to this talk afterwards, feel free also to reach out to me if you have any other questions come up, or if you just, there's something we didn't talk about that you'd like to know about, and then we can create another opportunity for that as well. So I'm going to invite us to really give ourselves a space to fully arrive in this moment together. So we're going to start with a little bit of meditation, drawing on practices from the traditional system of Reiki that Animal Reiki is based on. I teach both, and they're both really important to me. They're very much intertwined, and then each also has its own kind of special emphases. So but this practice of meditation is a key foundation for all of our traditional Reiki and Animal Reiki practices. And it helps us to create spaces for peace, for intentionality, for stillness in our full, exciting or busy or productive lives. Sometimes we have many different demands and responsibilities, and we even can sometimes put ourselves towards the bottom of that list. So this is a practice that really invites us to elevate self-care in our everyday lives, moment to moment throughout the day. This is a practice that we can always carry with us and we can always return to, both on purpose and then whenever we find we have a moment that we feel drawn to practice. So I think it's really good to take these moments, and then also each of us may be coming from a different activity right now, and it's a great way to kind of come together with that sense of purpose and peacefulness, and just really help to grow that inside of ourselves, and then help to create a nice container with each other. So our first part of this practice is to make sure that we're physically taken care of. So I invite you to find a way that feels comfortable for you to be seated, or if you're relaxing or lying down, just allowing, ideally if you can, if you're physically able to where you are right now, it's nice to maybe have your feet on the floor if you can, or just feel very kind of strong and stable in your sitting. And we want to try to have the chest and the belly and the lungs all have free movement. So in meditation practices in general, we're usually invited to sit on a chair with our back nice and tall. I like to think of it as a dignified posture. I also like to think of this as conscious sitting. So we're choosing to sit in a very upright and dignified way. We're choosing to let our chest have free movement. And this will also, in the tradition of Reiki, this also helps allow the energy and the blood and the breath to all flow freely. So there's a very practical reason behind this as well. It's not just about having good posture. It's having a good spiritual posture as well. And if you like, you're welcome to close your eyes. You can also have them open with just a gentle focus somewhere in your middle distance in front of you. The object is to really let our attention focus on the breath, breathing in and breathing out. And beginning to let that breath flowing in through our nose, moving all the way down, as if there's a lung in our belly, letting our belly begin to soften and expand. And as we breathe out, gently letting that breath flow from the belly area. You can even place a hand on your belly area to help you tune into this region, to help give you an extra focus for your mind to rest on the breath and letting the breath be nice and full. In the Eastern tradition, this region, this general area of the body, is thought of as the storehouse for our own original energy, our Reiki energy. And as we let our breath be very full into this area and full of purpose and full of intention, you can imagine that you're awakening this storehouse of energy, letting the breath mingle with the energy, beginning to fill this area of your body, what we might know as the hara, sometimes referred to as the center of our earth key. This might feel like warmth, or if you're more visual, you might envision this as a light. First beginning to expand with the breath throughout the whole belly area. And then gently beginning to expand from the belly area up into the rest of your body, your physical body, all the way up to your head and all the way down to the tips of your toes. I just want to invite you to continue to take nice, meaningful breaths. If you happen to find yourself beginning to reach or push for something to happen, I invite you to just relax into it, letting your mind open, And just simply noticing whatever might be true for you in this moment. If you happen to not experience anything right away, just know that's perfectly okay. A lot of these practices take time, and that's why we call them a practice. It's something that we keep coming back to. Just like learning a language or learning an instrument. We're not an expert right away. But we learn a little more each time. And if this is feeling familiar for you, if this is something that's really an experience that you're really fully having right now, just let yourself have that experience. Beginning to feel that presence of energy at your hara, filling your whole being. Feeling that sense of interconnection with Reiki energy, interconnection with the hara. You are not separate from Reiki energy, you're not separate from your hara. You are Reiki energy and you are your hara. And as we begin to gently move forward into the rest of our discussion, I invite you to continue to let your breath be mindful and full in this fashion. This is a wonderful practice to return to throughout the day. And particularly if you happen to move into a state of mind of stress or worry, spending a few very intentional minutes of changing your breathing, focusing on your breathing, can help bring so much room into those experiences, so many spaces for ease and peace. So valuable these days, so much going on in life, in the world. And we need to be able to be taking care of ourselves and showing up. And being able to be present. And as you're ready, I invite you to just take a nice gentle breath, gently bringing yourself into this space together. And again, you can just continue every once in a while to notice where your breathing is. Is it up high in your chest? Has your attention gone up into questions and worries or to-do lists, or is your attention nice down and low, down at the belly, at the hara? So you can just gently invite it back with a friendly hand, bringing the mind down into the body. So welcome again. I feel like when we practice, we become more present. We have more of ourselves present. And so it's like a new beginning. So welcome again. So today's conversation, we had some really interesting questions that you shared, things that you were wondering about this practice. And a couple of the questions were very just wide open and inviting any kind of information about the general approaches and practices and process for Animal Reiki. So I think that is going to be a nice place for us to begin, just to get a nice gentle overview of the practice, how I see the practice, and what are some of the basic principles or basic approaches. I think that'll be a nice foundation for everyone to get to hear. And then we'll move into some of the more kind of specific focused questions that, it'll just all weave together so nicely. So as an introduction, and I shared a little bit in the last call about the relationship between Animal Reiki and what I would call traditional Reiki or Japanese Reiki. There's really no one label for this. There's no one name for the particular lineage. There are names that are used, but they're also used by other branches and other lineages within Reiki. So it gets a little bit murky sometimes and confusing for people. So I just like to use those words, traditional or Japanese, to try to indicate a particular focus or effort within this lineage that I align with or that I resonate with, because I think there's a really wonderful intention to try and do our best to represent Reiki in, it's a few things actually, to represent Reiki in a really professional way, in a really ethical way. And also to really try and honor what the original teachings were as best we can understand them, given that we're now talking about 100 years of history that's gone by, and we don't always have tons of written records to inform us about, for example, Mikao Usui's personal beliefs about the system of Reiki, or the way that he taught, every moment of his classes, right? There's a lot of information that we just don't document. Even today, when I teach my classes, there's often not a record of some certain things because so much of it happens live, happens one-on-one, it happens in those live discussions when we're not documenting things. So that's just part of the fun of history, is that we will always have questions, but there have been some really wonderful, dedicated people making a lot of great effort to research and to try and learn as much as possible, as much as they can, and then bring it back to the rest of us who are not in person doing that research ourselves. So really trying to, I think, honor those beginnings. And that's a significant thing, because over the last 100 years, as Reiki has spread throughout the world, it's been intermingled with other traditions and other practices from other countries, and it's really transformed. It's turned into, in some cases, it's even thought about in very different ways. And not everyone knows that. I think when I first learned Reiki, I had no idea that there were multiple lineages. I just thought there was one Reiki and everyone knew the same things. It really didn't occur to me to even ask that much about that. I just didn't. There was so much new information and so many new ways of thinking that part I just really didn't focus on myself. And I think that's true for a lot of people. And the more that I interact with people around the world and with different practices, the more evident it becomes to me that there's often a lot of people who may think the same way, that we often think the way that we learn something is the only way, that is the way. So I think it's a very natural kind of human tendency. So this particular lineage for me is very grounded and very rooted in those traditional practices. And that's where this idea of meditation comes in. So the founder of the system, who probably everyone has heard of if you've taken a Reiki class, Mikao Usui, he has a really interesting background in and a deep relationship himself personally with various spiritual traditions that were present and in some ways are very much still present in Japan. So he experienced some very rigorous spiritual trainings, and he brought in certain elements of those trainings together to create what we might now call the system of Reiki, or the set of practices that we refer to as Reiki, or in this case, traditional or Japanese Reiki. So one of those we may have all heard of. There's the Reiki Precepts, and I'll actually show you those, the Japanese version of those, in a little bit. He brought in mantras, which are often now sometimes even not taught in a lot of lineages. I didn't learn them originally. So there was a chanting practice that he taught. He then later taught his students some symbols. And again, if someone's studied in a Western lineage of Reiki, it's very possible that you may have encountered many more symbols than he was teaching. There's various kind of westernized lineages that have brought in Tibetan symbols and all kinds of other wonderful creations that have helped people to learn about the concepts, but we won't find those in the traditional practices or in the traditional teachings. And it's very much founded in meditation, in mindfulness, and in the mindset of what a state of mind we can create and practice in order to create the most space for healing. So then Animal Reiki, which I actually came to first, I did my initial training, just again, coincidentally, happened to be a more westernized form. Unbeknownst to me, I didn't know the difference. I got very interested in the idea that we could work with animals and started to learn more about that, found my way into Animal Reiki, just resonated so strongly with those teachings. And then after working with Animal Reiki for a while, said, you know, I'm seeing all of these practices that are coming out of this other lineage, and I'd like to learn more about those directly too. So then I ended up studying the traditional form of Reiki as well. So Animal Reiki grew out of those traditional teachings. And if anyone has studied in that traditional lineage that they were founded on, there's a really strong relationship that's very clear. Otherwise, I think it gives people a really great way to get to experience the traditional teachings, but maybe through that open doorway, through Animal Reiki, just as I initially came to them that way too. So Animal Reiki, the way that I refer to it, because a lot of people around the world are Reiki practitioners who also practice with animals, and they might call that Reiki for animals or Animal Reiki. So again, can be kind of murky. So I just like to explain where I'm coming from. So the practice that I teach and work with and advocate for, or enjoy talking about, that I call Animal Reiki, was originally a set of adaptations of traditional Reiki practices that were put together or that evolved through a woman named Kathleen Prasad. She's still very much active and advocating for these practices, a certain way of working with animals. So that is very much alive and well. And this now has a history of about, I want to say maybe 15 or 20 years that we have had this kind of collection of approaches that we might call Animal Reiki. And this practice is based on letting the animal choose, first and foremost, what way they want to participate in the session. So in a mindset that might have come out of Reiki for humans, the way it's often taught, many of us might have thought that we would apply those same exact practices to working with animals. This is very true for me. I can definitely speak for myself in this scenario, that when I first learned Reiki, it was very focused on touch. It was very focused on hand positions when we would practice in person with someone at least. A little bit different when we get into maybe level 2 and distant Reiki, but we're actually going to come back to that based on one of the questions that was sent in. So we'll come back to that in a little bit. But so I had this cat at the time that when I was learning Reiki initially, and I was really kind of eager and hopeful to go home and begin to practice Reiki with her. I was very hopeful that this would even enhance our bond even more strongly than we already had, this really strong connection, this just deep affection for each other and love. I mean, it was like mother and daughter, and I never know whether she was my mother or I was her mother, but it was a very familial bond and very close. And when I went home and I'd be holding her and I would be having a wonderful snuggle moment with her, and I would think, ooh, this is a time I can, turn on my Reiki. I can do Reiki with her now. And so I would shift my intention and I would kind of become very purposeful about, now this is, practicing Reiki, and I've got my hands on her as she's in my arms, and she would take off. She wanted nothing to do with that. She would give me dirty looks. She was all the way across the room or in a different room and just kind of glaring at me. And it was very disheartening, to be honest. I felt very disappointed. I thought I must be doing something wrong, or what is going on here? How can I do this differently? I really wanted to have this experience with her. And that's what led me to look for some information, because I had this very strong intuitive sense that there was something I was missing. There was something else that I needed to know. And I also knew that I didn't feel comfortable to just take my Reiki knowledge out into the wild, so to speak, but also literally, and just walk up to any animal and place my hands on them and think that they were going to want to hold still for me and be with me in that way. There was just something inside of me as a longtime animal observer and animal lover that just, I didn't feel comfortable with that. And I couldn't put words to it at the time. I couldn't express it, but I could feel this hesitation. And so that's how I ended up looking for more information. And when I started reading about Animal Reiki, all of the bells were going off. It was all resonating for me. And I was like, that's it. Those are the words I was looking for. That's the thing that I've been trying to figure out for myself. So I'm so grateful to have come into that awareness and to have tools and to be empowered through that practice. And I really think that's true. Everyone can learn this. And it is a deep practice. And that's where the traditional Reiki really helps us, because it's a shift. It was a big difference for me to, over the course of several years, to begin to understand this different relationship with Reiki, and a deeper and more expansive relationship with Reiki that didn't rely on proximity, didn't rely on touch. And it wasn't about me doing something to the other individual, the creature, the person, whoever it might be. Because I think all of these truths also hold when we're working with people as well, when we're offering Reiki to people. So one of the big shifts for me, and I just used the word, or one of the words for me was a shift in thinking, a shift in language. It's one of the things I love to tell people about. In Animal Reiki, you'll often hear people say that they are offering Reiki to the animal. And this really gets at this underlying belief system that says that it's the animal's right to choose whether or not they're going to participate in that session. There's an Animal Reiki code of ethics, and that is one of the big kind of founding beliefs or theories within this, this practice. So if we didn't think that way, we might just walk right up to any animal and hold them still, and they might submit, so they might go along with it, particularly if it's a domesticated animal. They might permit us to hold them still, but they're also partially trained to do that. So it doesn't really honor their full right as an independent or sentient being. Now, there are many cases in our lives in which we are in the position of caring for an animal and making choices for them and making decisions for them. And that's our job, that's our role, to take really good care of them. So there are things that we do need to make choices for them about, because they can't go to the grocery store and do the food shopping for themselves, right? If they're an indoor pet, that's the relationship that we have. But Reiki invites us then to have certain times, and maybe it flows throughout our whole life in other ways, where we are allowing ourselves to take on a different role, a different relationship. So it offers a lot of new opportunities. It can be very expansive for us, and it can be very expansive for them to get to have that new way of relating to us as well. So we always want to let them have choice. And one of the ways that we can do that is by practicing the traditional Reiki meditations near the animal. One of our great concepts that you might hear me refer to from time to time pretty often is being Reiki. So we're really practicing becoming our true intended self, becoming aware and fully in presence with Reiki energy throughout our entire being. It's not just about our hands. So I always like to tell people, what if we didn't have hands? We could, of course, still practice Reiki. So if we do have hands, it's a great reminder that we can actually learn more about it, and it's not just focused on touch or Reiki being somehow moved through our hands. It's our entire presence. It's our entire being. So with animals, we're holding and cultivating and learning this really wonderful, loving, calm, grounded, stable presence with them. Like we are this beautiful light, and we're recognizing their beautiful light, and then our two lights can grow brighter together and shine even more perfectly and unencumbered. So our practices help us to learn how to do that. And an animal, if they are willing to practice with us or to receive our offer of Reiki, and then we're sharing Reiki together. So I mentioned there were kind of two key words. One is offering and one is sharing. And for me, sharing then represents that willingness and acceptance on their part to be Reiki together, for us to be Reiki with each other. And this is really something that we can practice with all species of animals or creatures. We may not always use the word animal for every creature. So for example, insects. So everybody's got houseflies or spiders in your house. If you're out in the desert, you might have, other critters that you wouldn't want to hold in your hands, but technically you could sit near them and practice your meditation and just be willing for them to participate with you if they would like to. And that's another one of our key concepts, is the right to refuse. So that's another way that we can deeply honor and respect them as individuals. It's a really wonderful practice. It gives us a whole, maybe new for some creatures in our lives, a new way of relating with them. We can practice with farm animals, with wildlife. Not many wildlife are going to run right up into our hands or be comfortable with us holding them, but we can sit near them and they may pause, they may come close, they may hang out with us. I hear so many people tell me, my students and other people I know who practice, who have been practicing Animal Reiki now for a few years, and they'll tell me how much more wildlife is in their backyard, for example, just because they're continually practicing this very peaceful and welcoming mindset without struggle, without force, without pressuring the animals to participate. That's another one of our big concepts. So we learn how to release expectations, and it's very much a practice. Again, we'll keep coming back to that word because we have to keep recommitting, setting that intention, learning more about it through the practice, and we keep practicing and practicing and practicing. These things aren't like a light switch sometimes. They don't just turn on for us. The awareness is something that goes much deeper than that. And it can become a whole way of life. It can become our whole way of being and being in relationship with others in the world. And again, humans too. This can very much be a practice with humans as well. Yeah, so that's a little bit of an introduction to Animal Reiki practices. And of course, it's so much more than that. That's just a really brief introduction. Another piece I'll share is that, so we're sitting in this meditation now. What do we do now? Again, there's a lot of different things we could talk about, but touch can be involved. And I just want to mention that too. So if an animal is near us and we're sitting in our meditation, we might have our hands gently palms up in our lap. There's another one of our practices where we have our hands in gasho throughout the meditation, the prayer position. So we might be seated. Sometimes we'll have our eyes open, gently observing the animal's relationship with us. Do they seem like they're getting into a little Reiki meditation themselves? Or are they maybe indicating to us that they would like us to stop offering? So we do want to gauge what their response is and be very sensitive to that. But we might also have our eyes sometimes closed. And the animal then gets free movement. So ideally they might be, let's say it's a dog or a cat, we might be in their home. They might get to move around the room with us, and they can then choose, do they want to come close? Do they want to move further away? They might even sometimes go into another room, but that might be where they feel good experiencing the Reiki treatment. So it teaches us so many new ways of thinking about Reiki and Reiki treatments, even in-person treatments. So as you begin to maybe play with this in your own life, or as you begin to learn more, I think you'll really begin to see how there's a lot of things that that our mind tells us that we can actually unlearn as we continue to practice. And I'm just smiling because, again, I'm thinking about all the ways that I discovered those things in myself. All of the things that I thought, oh, they are a certain way, and then they never are. Like, they often, those ideas fall down the more that we practice. And that's really nice. It's really fun, actually, and really heartwarming. And animals can also teach us so much. So there's so many things that we will learn by getting to practice Reiki with animals. They will continue to teach us things about Reiki. Every animal is different. Every animal is an individual. They do not all experience Reiki in the same way. And it's not, to me, it's not a species dependent thing either. It's very much an individual experience, just as with humans. They're each unique and each moment is unique. So even if you work with the same animal you know, 40 days in a row, each day could still be different. But so some animals that we have, that it's safe to touch or that we have permission to touch, they may want to come up close to us. So maybe they will, you know, not do what we think of as Reiki with people often. They might just come up and lean against us. Maybe they'll snuggle up in our lap, maybe they'll lie at our feet. So they may have physical contact somewhere on our body, but they may not. And that is just as valid. Those experiences of Reiki are very palpable for them. So we just let them do what they would like to do. There are some occasions where an animal might come up and kind of press their body into a hand, if a hand is available for them. But what we need to practice is not waiting for that to happen, not getting locked into an idea that that is what Reiki is about. So again, just remembering to keep letting our mind soften and be very open to lots of possibilities. And I know that that's a practice and it doesn't all happen at once. So don't be worried if you do catch yourself. The best part's just to notice and then kind of let yourself soften a little bit more each time that that happens. Yeah, so that's what I'll say about that. So there was a question about hand positions for animals in Animal Reiki. And so I feel like that is what we're really talking about right now, is we don't need to use hand positions when we're working with animals in this tradition. And I do recognize and honor that there are different ways that people have chosen to practice Reiki with animals around the world and around, you know, the years. So I'm just representing this particular approach that I think really has so much worthiness to it. And the animals in my work have responded so well to this too. So I definitely think there's a lot here. And so when we are being Reiki, and again, it's not about our hands, therefore the whole experience of Reiki shifts and becomes something more expansive. So we're not limited either to a series of hand positions. If the animal chooses to have touch, just go with what they're looking for. And this is true for people too. When we do, say, chair Reiki treatments, seated Reiki treatments, I'll often find, like, say I'm doing a booth at a festival or some kind of event where we have, 10 to 15 minutes, someone's seated in a chair. I'll place my hands maybe somewhere near their head or their shoulders, and we could easily spend 40 minutes with me just having my hands in one place. I don't have to move around in order for them to have a full experience of Reiki energy, and I don't even need to use touch either. So same thing with animals. So yeah, there are not specific hand positions taught in this tradition, and that's why. So I would really suggest also, trying that on for size and seeing how that feels. Maybe you have a pet at home, and this can be a way to help kind of bridge also for the animals around us, that often people will tell me, oh, my dog doesn't like Reiki, or my cat, like in my case, I might have interpreted that as my cat, just didn't like Reiki. But actually, we often find if we just change our techniques, if we change our mindset, if we change our approach, if we soften as the practitioner or the student, if we shift inside, then all kinds of possibilities can open up. So I think there's a lot more possible than sometimes we're aware of. So hand positions is one of those, I think one of those really informative relationships that we can have with animals. Okay, so another question that came in. I actually got a couple of questions that kind of are, one of them was about distance healing for animals, or distant Reiki, which I mentioned we'd come back to. That's a level 2 practice that is taught. And so there was a question, can that be done through a photo on a computer screen? And then I had another question that was kind of similar, because it mentioned using surrogates for animals. And this question actually is related to practicing with animals in person, I think. And I think I've already kind of even touched on this specific question, because the sort of second half of it is this method more about meditating with them? So yeah, this method in person is very much about meditating with them. And really it's not even about whether it's in person or distant at that point. That's just the practice in general. And the underlying concept that we learn about through this practice is there's a spiritual underpinning. There's a spiritual concept that helps explain how these things are possible. And if we had to put a name on why we're feeling what we're feeling, which of course it's best to maybe learn not to kind of analyze it too rigorously in that way, but just to experience it and let it be open. But the underlying sort of spiritual concept is that we're all already connected, that we're all interconnected all the time. And so it doesn't matter whether we are in the same room or in the same town, that we are still the same energetic beings, and that we can experience this space with each other. There's a lot more that can be said about that. And of course, that's why we have classes, because there is so much more all the time. But yeah, so surrogates is one of those ideas, and photographs, same idea, that are often taught as tools for offering Reiki to other beings when they're not in the same physical space with us. So maybe they're not in the same room or even in the same house. What I think personally about these tools is that they, like so many of the other aspects of the system of Reiki, for example, the symbols, the mantras, they, I believe, are primarily tools to help us to focus, to help us to remember and to have a sense of that interconnection, that underlying connection. And when we practice, it's very possible that we will be able to, and hopefully we'll be able to experience that sense of interconnection, at least at some point, without necessarily needing a tool. But I think in terms of training, I think Usui himself brought in tools to help his students to learn and to meet them where they were at that point in their understanding, at that point in their lives. And so the symbols, for example, is another level 2 and also level 3 concept that we find throughout the various lineages. Typically, everybody learns the symbols at some point, or some version of the symbols. What we understand now is that he brought those in as a tool for his students to help them to learn about different aspects of different qualities of Reiki energy, just to put it in very brief terms. And they are often, ways to help us to develop, to train ourselves, to have these experiences, to open, to be more grounded, for example, all of these different qualities of our experience. So I think personally, and in fact, I have a little example I can use here. So for a surrogate example, we might have something like a little stuffed animal or even a big stuffed animal. When I have practiced distant Reiki, especially early on when I was beginning to work with animals, I did typically, this is something from my original training. It was a concept that I was familiar with. And so for me, it was a kind of natural transition to continue to use them. And at the same time, I think we don't need them. So we want to always be practicing kind of letting go of attachments. That's a very Buddhist concept. And of course, Reiki is based very much in Buddhist traditions as well. So it's natural that we would see that coming in. So I think whatever we use, whatever helps us to have a sense of presence with that other individual, I think that can be very helpful. And then ultimately, we'll continue to have that experience of presence with that individual, but we won't need necessarily a bridge object or a tool to help us to get there, so to speak, because we'll eventually be learning that we are already connected, and the tangible object will just sort of not be needed anymore. So I think of photographs and surrogates. Some people teach about using a part of your body and imagining, for example, like say you put your hand on your leg and you imagine that your kneecap is like their head. This is if you're doing hand positions for a person. This was one of my things that I learned initially. But we don't need to do that. We don't need to, it's not like using, a little mock-up of the individual. And certainly with animals, if we're not doing hand positions anyway, then that really wouldn't translate. So I think the most expansive thing we can do is to, again, just always let our mind be as open as possible and to really focus on that sense of interconnection. But if it helps us to visualize that individual by seeing their picture, if that helps us to feel that this experience is somehow real and tangible, I think that can help be a bridge for us and a tool for us personally. But we don't need those in order for Reiki to be experienced by that individual or in order for that treatment to be effective. the internet these days can be a really interesting tool for connection, because it can actually be a nice way of sharing that treatment with someone over distance, but in a live way, where it's almost as if we are, because we can see each other moving and we can hear each other talking, that can be a way that can really help the recipient, like say the human companion for the animal, that can help it feel like a very personal experience for them. So there are interesting hybrid forms that technology presents for us now. And that might be interesting for someone to try as well. So you can be on the phone with someone, you could be live over Skype or Zoom or one of these kinds of platforms, or you can just do the session without being live with each other at that moment, and then maybe connect afterward by phone or email or texting and share some things that occurred for you, that you experienced, and what they witnessed, what they experienced as well. So the other part of this question about surrogates was whether I ever use a surrogate. And like I say, I think this question is actually specific for an in-person experience of animal Reiki. And I thought this was a really interesting idea, and I don't think that I have ever done that. Not sure that it occurred to me to try that either, to be totally transparent. But I certainly don't think it's necessary. But again, if it helps someone to feel that sense of interconnection, because we're very touch-oriented creatures. Like for us, the feeling of touch can feel really good. Now, again, that's not a universal experience. Everyone's different. So for some people, touch is uncomfortable, and they may not have that same relationship. But for some of us, that may help us just to feel kind of warm and interconnected with each other. But I would just let it be really more about the experience of Reiki and not about the object. Yeah, and there's a lot more that could be said about that, but we'll just leave that there for the moment, as I think, yeah, a little bit of an introduction. Okay, I'm just checking. Oh yeah, so there was another great question here, and I wanted to share just for a moment. Let's see if I can do a little screen share here. So someone asked, what are the affirmations for Animal Reiki? And so what I believe this question is asking is about the Reiki precepts, if there are any specific or different Reiki precepts for Animal Reiki. And so what I thought I would do is I thought I would share with you the traditional Reiki precepts, the original Japanese, and then the translations of those into English, because they are one of those things that often has been translated in a lot of different ways, and sometimes we only see them in our native language, and we maybe haven't gotten to see them in Japanese before. And there's a really nice practice we can do also with chanting the precepts in Japanese. If you come back and experience another event with me, or check out my other videos and audio files and things, you'll get to experience those, because I do love to share that with people, and it's just a wonderful meditation practice. So let me do a share here and pull those up so you can see them too. Okay. So in order for them to be large enough, I'm just going to leave it where I'm going to scroll through them a little bit. And then if anyone would like, you can always reach out to me by email or something, and I'll be happy to share these files with you. So you see the Japanese kanji, and then on the left, we have kyodake wa, ikaruna, shinpai suna, kansha shite, gyo o hakeme, hito ni shinsetsu ni. And I'll leave these last 5 up, are the actual 5 precepts. That first one for today only, sometimes we see just for today. But so these are the traditional Reiki precepts, and they're the same ones that we would work with, or we do work with, in Animal Reiki. And there's another kind of tool, or I don't know what to call it exactly, offering that I have created inspired by the traditional Reiki precepts, but really drawing on the kind of some of the big teachings within Animal Reiki. And so I don't really call them precepts, but maybe just sort of colloquially, that kind of resonates for us. They're written in the same style or spirit of the traditional Reiki precepts. And I wanted to show you those as well. So I call it recommendations for Reiki with animals. And this really gets into that idea of our mindset with we've talked a little bit about some of these things today. So do not pity, that's something we didn't talk about yet, but we want to really see that individual, that animal or that human as that beautiful bright light that we all have inside of ourselves. In some meditation traditions, it's called basic goodness. That's another nice phrase, I think, that we can start playing with in our lives and seeing what that feels like. But we want to keep our energy, our mindset, very focused on the positive. Not that we're denying any parts of anyone's experience, but we are modeling a way of being. And so we need to work with our own mindset in order to do that really effectively. So not pitying, not judging. We'll see these sometimes coming through in traditional Reiki teachings too. Being soft and open, just allowing whatever is right for the animal. We've talked about releasing desire and expectations a little bit. And of course, bringing our attention to the breath, remembering that interconnection, and really seeing them as that beautiful light and then being that light ourselves. And really trusting, I might even update this to really trust the animal and trust Reiki. I think they go together. So those what might be what we could call affirmations within Animal Reiki. This is at least my creation. I'm going to see if I can get us out of the screen share now that I've started this. Oh, there it is. It was the tiny red button. Now we found it. So that's what I wanted to share with you for today. And I'm going to take the last few minutes here to unmute everybody, or to let you unmute yourselves. And I want to just check in and see if anyone has any new questions that have come up, follow-up questions, maybe inspired by some of these topics. Oh, that's totally, someone put in the chat box that your dog is, oopsies, I unmuted you. There we go, I'll remute you. That the dog was barking in the background. But yeah, also you're welcome to type a question into the chat if you'd like. Oh yeah, no problem at all. They have a way of doing that. They will bark sometimes, so it's totally okay. But yeah, if anyone has any follow-up questions, feel free to share those. Oh, and actually I skipped over one. There was a question about how to set up a class in someone's local area. And if you have any interest in doing that, I love to travel and teach these practices. So we can definitely communicate about that one-on-one and just see what might be possible. So I just love doing that. And I do teach in as many different places as I can, essentially, throughout the year. And then I try to work in different cities also. Like if I didn't get to one year, then the next year I try to fit it in. So I have classes that I've been doing in Boston area, in Maine, Cincinnati, Chicago, Southern Indiana, Phoenix, Arizona area. I taught in Sweden or Europe before. So a lot of great places out there to go. And then I also teach online. So if you wanted to set up, something at a time that works for you in your time zone, definitely please reach out to me. And I'm so happy to work with you on that to make something accessible for you, because there's a lot of really wonderful things we can learn out of these practices, and we can definitely, it's so accessible that we definitely can learn them online as well. I love doing those classes too. And in person, of course, we get so much out of that as well. It's a whole different kind of experience sometimes. And it's really about who else shows up, who else is part of the class, and what interesting stories they bring to it, and all the experiences we share together along the way. So they're both really good methods, I think. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any other questions come up over in the chat. So I hope everyone is feeling, really intrigued and enlightened and uplifted, and maybe even a little empowered to begin to learn more or to practice maybe in some new ways, and kind of engage with that a little bit more. And I'll just let you know that after all of these calls this week are done, I'm going to send out an email to everybody who registered, and I'll share some links with you that got mentioned, maybe these documents that I share. And then when I put the videos online or the audios online, I've got links that are going in the descriptions as well. So for example, today we just briefly mentioned it, but the last call we talked a little bit about the Animal Reiki Code of Ethics and the traditional Reiki Code of Ethics that I follow and Code of Practice. So I put those links in the video description, so you can then access and learn a little bit more about them yourself. So then there'll be whole other things coming, but we'll take some of these individual topics and spend more time on them, because they each obviously have so much more depth than what we might go into right now. So yeah, so if you have any other questions come up, please feel free to message me or email me and let me know, and I'll continue to create some more content around that as well. Or I can share some info back over email or Facebook Messenger, or whichever ways that we get in touch. And then also, please, if you're on Facebook, please feel free to join my Facebook group if you haven't already. There's a lot of great discussions that happen in there too, and links and, you know, upcoming events and all of that kind of good stuff. And you're always welcome to go in there and post a question, because other people then get to see it and they get to learn from it too, which is really great. And it's just, yeah, it's so wonderful to get to hear what people are interested in, what questions you have, and what you're asking yourself. Yeah, to see what we can help provide you with. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here. Really, really appreciate you. I appreciate all of your participation leading up to this and sharing your great questions. I hope this has been really helpful for you. And yes, you're so welcome. Just looking at a chat comment. So I really hope this has been so helpful for you, and I'll look forward to interacting with you again, hopefully soon.
Thank you, Kat. I can't wait to see you in Phoenix if you can get back there.
I would look forward to that myself so much. I just love it there. It's so beautiful. And there's so many amazing animal sanctuaries out there too. So I'm kind of dreaming up some really special, yeah, some new events and some really special stuff. So yeah, that will definitely happen. And I'll let you know when that's going to be.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for being here. All right. Wishing you all a really, really beautiful evening or night or day, depending on where you are at the moment. And I look forward to connecting with you again whenever we get the chance. Thanks for being here.